So, for those of you who are just joining us, welcome back to the Influencer's Journey show. The topic today is unapologetically feminine, sexy, and brilliant. I love this title. My name is Suzanne Hart. This is my girl, Taria Hodge. And we are so excited to be jumping into this topic. So, let's get the conversation rocking and rolling, Taria. So the first question we have is, what's the difference between being, you guys listen to this one, assertive and or aggressive? What is the difference between the two?
Yeah. So for me, when I take a look at assertive behavior or being assertive for me is standing up for yourself. That's it. So how do you stand for yourself? How do you hold strong on the things that you believe or the things that you know and your way of being? And when I think about being aggressive, is that threatening behavior, or like what I termed at the top of the show, just being rude. And so I do believe that as women in business, we are required to be assertive, but we don't have to operate from a place of aggression. And we see it all the time, and it's a big conversation in business, and it's a big conversation for us as women, in our personal lives, just how we walk through the world. And so, like I said, there's nothing wrong with standing up for yourself, holding your ground, holding on to what you believe to be true. But you never have to be rude, you never have to put another person down, you never have to go and do all of the undermining, manipulative things to be seen as a powerful woman in business.
Oh, great answer. I love it. When I was thinking about this question, the book that came to mind is Power versus Force.
Mm,
And really, when we are aggressive, we are in our force energy. We
mm,
are forcing something to occur. And oftentimes people become aggressive when they feel, get this, out of control, and
mm.
they're fighting to regain control or appear in control. Aggression is often a defense mechanism. So when we're aggressive, we're in our force energy. Now, this is the interesting thing. Aggression often is an external power. And you know me, mindset. So we're going to talk mindset for a moment. So in power dynamics, there's external power that comes from position, title, that sort of thing. And oftentimes when people are aggressive, they're asserting themselves, often because of position, often because of title, or they're in
Mhm.
fight, flight, right? So they're stressed. So that is aggression. So the question is, where does our assertiveness, that energy, come from? Well, assertiveness is an internal dynamic. So when I am assertive, I am using my internal power. Internal power is the most interesting thing because it comes from our belief in ourselves due to experiences, successes, things we believe we are capable of. And when we stand in that place, we speak from that place. And it's not about forcing your opinion on someone, it's not about coercion, it's not about making something happen. It is about standing firm in your belief and value and speaking to that and asserting your position. Now, what is really interesting about being assertive is that assertive is very much a part of an influencer's toolkit. Because
Yes.
influence is getting people to do something when they choose to, not because they have to.
Right.
Aggression is forcing someone to do something that if they had a freedom of choice, they would do it. They wouldn't do it. So that's the difference between the two. And so for me, it's really understanding and reminding myself that it has a lot to do with who I believe myself to be and the
Hmm.
power I believe I have within me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you're sharing that. And another thing that's standing out for me, the difference between, being in situations where you have to assert yourself versus being aggressive. When we take a look at being assertive, and then we're talking about mindset as well. So when you are assertive, you use different languaging, and and I like to tie it and say it's like the buy-in language. So when you are in that mode, and like I said, it's coming from a place of confidence. You know what you know what you believe, and you're willing to take a stand for that. You are able to do that by respecting other people. So you don't ever have to be disrespectful. You don't ever have to put down somebody else's opinion or somebody else's stand. Whereas when you look at it, when we are in that aggressive mode, is always a disrespect, there's always a shutdown, of someone, and not allowing, them to, have their space as well. So that's one of the huge things that come up for me when I take a look at the difference between the two.
One is you stand in enrollment, and
Mhm.
enrollment
Yeah.
is inviting someone to
Yeah.
look at the world through the perspective that you are looking at the world. Now, notice the word I'm using. It's
Yes.
inviting, and it's also allowing people to create the space for people to freely choose. I'm
Hmm.
asserting an opinion, and or I'm standing up for myself and saying I am going to freely choose something other than what you're choosing, and I'm going to explain why, and I'm going to stand firm in this place and space. And so it really is a skill. And why we thought it was so key is, how often do you see women being aggressive
Hmm.
because they're saying they're standing in their power?
Hmm.
Right? And when we are aggressive, we aren't actually standing in our power. We're actually demonstrating to the world that we feel like we don't have power.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes, very interesting.
It is such an interesting dynamic. You know, I remember having a team that I supervised, and the language they used at the table was mind blowing.
Hmm.
Like, they were dropping F-bombs and calling each other the B word and all this sort of thing. And I was sitting at the table. It was my first time. I had just taken on the position, so I was their new manager. And I was like, "What on earth?" And when I asked them, they told me they were standing in their power.
Mm.
And I thought, wow, if this is what you believe power is, we are in trouble, because we serve clients who
Yeah.
are marginalized and so on and so forth. I think this is scary. And so a lot of work had to be done around just explaining power dynamics,
Mm.
and explaining positional power versus personal power, overuse of power and force, underuse of power and force, so that they could actually step into this place of being assertive rather than forceful.
Hmm. Yeah. and
Interesting.
and it very interesting. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about a specific conversation I think you and I had, if I can recall. And I remember I was at an event and we were talking about the same thing, being able to embrace feminine energy, and not and first of all, understanding and recognizing your feminine energy. And I think a lot of times we as women, we know we have the energy. And I'm not gonna speak for all women. I'm gonna speak for me. I know that there was a time that I was scared of my feminine energy. I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with this. And so I had a tendency to shy away from
Mhm.
the feminine energy. And I thought that being feminine, or some aspects of the femininity didn't really have a place in business. And I remember being able to sit and unpack that conversation, with you. And I do believe we had a few other ladies, at the table we were having the
Yeah.
conversation with. And it's understanding is when we embrace the feminine, our feminine energy, and and I don't want to say use it, but it is a part of us. and become comfortable with it, we also notice things in our business shift and how we relate, to other women,
Mhm.
right? Because we also, talked about that in the green room today. How does aggressive behavior show up in the marketplace, for women versus how it shows up for men? But it also helps us in our relationships with the guys too. And so one of the things that, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it, like, embracing your feminine energy doesn't mean that you have to be overly sexualized,
Oh, so
right?
you hit the nail on the head. So
Mhm.
so Napoleon Hill, I think, is one of the best people to write about this thing called it's our sexual energy. And as soon
Mhm.
as people hear the word sexual energy, they think sex and sexy.
Mhm.
and and one of the things is we all have this sexual energy. And I remember my first coach telling me I have huge sexual energy. I was so offended and so freaked out. And he told me it was a good thing. And he says, but you're afraid of it. Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't know what you're talking about. And now I'm petrified. That's kind of what was going through my head. And 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 our feminine energy is that thing we call charisma on a man,
Mhm.
right? That man is charismatic. He's magnetic. Your feminine energy, your sexual energy is the thing that when you walk into a room, people know you're there and they don't know what it is about you, but they're like, what is that? I got to go meet that person. That's that energy. It's equal to our charismatic.
Yeah.
Most of us confuse our feminine energy and our sexual energy to our sex energy, for lack of a
Mhm.
better word.
Right.
It's not the same thing. So where does it come from? It comes from this place of self-love. It comes from a place where you believe in yourself. It comes from this place of certainty.
Yeah.
And when we are sitting in that place, the energetics of who we be is attractive. Now, what Napoleon Hill says is that when you harness that, it's magnetic,
Mhm.
and people can feel it on you. And he says most of us get into this place later on in life because we're getting more comfortable in who we be. This is where our ability to also be assertive lives. It's this place where you know who you be and you're confident and comfortable with who you be. You walk different, you stand different, you enter spaces and places differently, and people can feel it on you. It lives in our inner work. It has less to do with how we look, because that's what well, a lot of times people confuse
Mhm. You
you
confuse
know,
it with that.
with
Yeah.
got all this going on. I can tell you, you can be wearing your sweatpants and your running shoes and have that sexual energy, and you walk with a swagger, right? So it's when we do our inner work, it shows up in our beingness. That's what we're talking about. So Tria, can someone be feminine and assertive?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we are unpacking here. And when I take a look at it, I like to look at it as being able to harness or hone in on my people skills,
Yeah.
my people sensitivity skills. So once again, when you are, a woman, this about us as women. Naturally we are nurturers. Naturally we have concerns. If you are, working with teams, you want to make sure that your team members are okay. You're working with other leaders. We just have, that innate thing that we do. And so it's not about ignoring and saying that, these things have no place in business, or even when you're working with your clients, it's okay. So one of the things that I noticed, and I don't know, and I think this comes into play one of the biggest shifts for me that happened in my business is ending my calls with "I love you."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I remember when the shift came about, and it was that almost of the letting go of the belief that I had to always be this, and you don't have to be that. So it's okay to connect. We talk about our emotional branding all the time. So it's okay to connect and have that heart to heart, connection with your clients. It's okay to have that heart to heart connection with your team. As women, we should be able to bring those issues and talk about things, because once again, when those things are addressed, it makes for a better environment for everyone to show up at their best. So like I said, I do my people sensitivity check, when finding myself being insensitive, or sometimes I'm called on the carpet, like, that was really insensitive, what you did there or what you said there, you didn't take into account of how I feel. Then it's just like, oh, I'm out of line here, because I always go back to that time when I myself felt like I was shut down.
Cindy's asking a question. Can you
Mhm,
please elaborate on feminine energy versus male energy? And that's such a great question.
mhm,
And I'm going to gander. I'm going to attempt a description or definition. I think what we're talking about is that there's certain behaviors that we attribute to being masculine,
mhm.
and there's certain behaviors that we attribute to being feminine. So more sensitive, more caring. Most people to put that in the feminine realm, and then the more assertive, more driven, all those things, they tend to be things that we put in the masculine realm. And both of them have energetics. They have ways of being. So that's kind of what we're talking about. And so the question is, can we be feminine and just be ourselves as women who tend to be more nurturers, more, some people would say sensitive, all those things? Can we maintain that way of being and also survive and thrive and win in business? That's really the question on the table. And one of the things that it brings me back to is my team used to call me the woman with the velvet whip.
I just had a visual, but anyway.
Right. The woman with the velvet whip. And anyone who's worked with me will probably relate to this. I know Cindy and a few other people who are in my mastermind have told me that I can tell you the hardest thing, and you'll lean in and go, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Oh my goodness, I can tell you things that are hard to hear about yourself, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, thank you for that. I didn't know that." That I attribute to my femininity. And I can be assertive, yet extremely gentle, and allow you to feel whole and complete while I'm telling you this hard thing.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the gifts as a women that we bring to the table is that dance between the two. And if we allow it to happen, it's a great comfort between the nurturer and the assertive person, the nurturer and the assertive person. And we bring a uniqueness to the table when we sit in that place. I also think that I can say things to my male counterpart that other men can't say to them,
Yeah.
partly because I'm not a man. So there's no comparison. There's none of that going on. And I can leave them feeling whole and complete as I have the conversation. So part of it for me is not attempting to be male like.
Mhm.
However, understanding what is unique about Suzanne, the feminine woman who has a whole bunch of skills, talents, and treasures. What is the unique thing that I bring to the table? And how do I use that to move an agenda forward, to move a project forward, to move uh, anything forward? And so for me, I think part of my gifting is that I am a woman, And as a result, I do have a nurturing side to me. Part of my gifting is also I am a tomboy, and I do have a masculine side that I'm very comfortable with. And so it's how do I dance between those places that make Suzanne and feel totally comfortable in that place. And I bring my unique self to the table.
Yeah.
And we all show up differently, and we all have those different degrees of who we be. I think the key thing is to know that I don't have to show up like my male counterparts to be taken seriously.
Right.
I think I'm taken more seriously because I am the woman who's comfortable being feminine and also asserting herself when necessary.
Yeah. And I think you just rolled right into the next point that we want to talk. Like, the question on the table is, how do you do that? You know? And
Mm.
for me, what comes up is like the thing is we said before, is having that, inner confidence, number one. Like, when you know who you be and you're confident in that and you stand in it, then there's no place, for the aggressive behavior. There's no need for you, to be rude about anything, or rude with anyone in how you address, an issue that's on the table. And and one of the things that I thought about as I was preparing for this, they always say it's like a dog eat dog world. I don't know whose dog is going out there eating other people's dogs, but it's kind of like watching the things that we tell ourselves, right? Because we hear these things going around, in conversations in the marketplace. Maybe it's how we grow up, and we kind of assimilate that into ourselves. And it's all about being able to challenge those things. And another thing that came up for me, and we're talking about being feminine and holding that role. And what I want our ladies to get, it's not about being passive either. And
No.
so a lot of, women also mistake, say, well, oh, okay, I'm going to be ladylike about this. And they keep quiet and their voices go unheard. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that, you have the ability, to stand up, get your viewpoints out there, but you don't have to lose, who you are in 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 order to do it.
One of the books that really helped me with this conversation was The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace T. Wattles. I've recommended that book to so many people. It's in the public domain, so it's free. And he defined that there's no such thing as competition. And when I first
Mhm.
heard it, I was like, "What? What do you mean there's no such thing as competition?" But when I got this, it was so powerful. In his mind, the world is abundant,
Mhm.
and and we compete because we think there's scarcity.
Yeah.
We compete because we don't think we're good enough. We compete because we have a need to prove ourselves.
Mhm.
And what he was saying is, when you sit in this place of abundance and you take away the need to prove and compete with someone else,
Mhm.
things shift for you.
Yeah.
And for me, what shifted was it became a need to grow myself, because I wasn't no longer comparing myself with other people. It was, how do I make this best better tomorrow?
Yeah.
And when I got to that place, it freed me up to freely speak. And I think the thing was because I was no longer attempting to belong. I was no longer attempting to fit in. I was no longer attempting to be like everyone else.
Yeah.
What I was more committed to is standing my ground and standing for what I believe. And so what happened was I started asking myself, what are my values? What do I stand for? What are my non negotiables? In other words, what are the things I won't tolerate? What are the boundaries I have? What are the boundaries I have around how people engage with me, what
Right.
they can ask of me, how they can talk to me, all those things. And when I became clear on those became what guided whatever table I sat at. And it had less to do with other people and everything to do with Suzanne making sure she was whole and complete when
Yeah.
she left a conversation. It was around Suzanne setting boundaries so people were very clear on how I expected them to engage and treat me. And when I started getting really clear, magic began to happen because I realized is I teach the world how to engage with me. And when
Yes.
I set those limits and those boundaries, the world will actually engage with me the way
Right.
I want them
And
to.
the terms, right.
Right. And for some people, that means ending conversations. For some
Mm-hmm.
people, that means getting up and leaving a conversation and inviting them to continue the conversation when they have more composure, when they're able to be more respectful, when they are able to do all the things that are okay in terms of how I want to be interacted. And people have walked away upset and then had to check themselves because they realized, oh, she's serious. Yes, I'm serious. And I was able to do it without being rude, without being disrespectful,
Mhm.
without being aggressive, without name calling, but clearly holding a boundary around this is how I would like to be treated.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and it's so great because even for me on the journey, those are some of the lessons that I had to learn the hard way. So yeah, I didn't step in on the journey knowing those things, but trust and believe that's why you need to get you a mindset mastery.
I didn't start out this way. This is like hard knock lesson. Hard
Awesome.
knock.
And I see that Nisi is out here, and Nisi is saying that's the way the trend is going. Most definitely, women are leaning into masculine energy and taking the lead, and men are embracing their feminine energy and being supportive. So thank you for that, Nisi. And it's such a great point that Nisi is making here. Like we talked about to the top of the show, we both have both, right? So we do have as women masculine energy and we have feminine energy, and men do have feminine and masculine energy as well. And I think it's that interplay of knowing when it's
Mhm.
necessary, to use both. And so there are times, yes, when I do have to step into my masculine energy, and I've seen times when men have stepped into their feminine energy, the brave brothers, who embrace it and do it. It doesn't mean that they're soft or whatever other names people choose to call them, but they're just able to know that it's also part of them. And when you take a look at those people in the marketplace, right? They're once again that we have towards.
We lost the last thing you said, Tria. If you can repeat the last sentence you
What was the last thing I said? Oh my
when
gosh.
you look at them in the marketplace.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when you look at them in the marketplace, those are the ones that become more endearing to us, right? So if you take a look at it, so I know of some influencers that literally stay in their masculine energy at all times, and there's an audience for them, right? But the ones who are really able to do that interplay and that understanding of when masculine energy is needed and when feminine energy is needed, you'll notice it's a totally different dynamic in how they
Mhm.
show up at the marketplace. And those are the men that I like to follow.
It's interesting. A great example of that is Tony Robbins, because Tony
Mhm,
Robbins, big, loud, big energy, lots of energy. And then if you watch him coach, there's a shift into a softness, and there's a
mhm,
shift into a gentleness, and there's a shift into and what it really is he knows who he's required to be to give his
mhm.
best to that moment. And really, that's what it is for all of us, is who am I required to be? How am I required to show up to give my best to this moment? And sometimes it is gentle. Sometimes
Mhm.
it is strong. Sometimes it's assertive. It's really being able to ask yourself, who am I required to be in this moment? So